In late 2013, a Dollar General cashier in Salados, Texas released a child-friendly mobile game that would lay the groundwork for the next generation's horror media and create a massive boom in YouTube's gaming scene. And less than a decade after this game's release, this man will become a multimillionaire. How, you may ask? How could a small indie game all about cute animals in the forest do all of that? Well, because it bombed. This game is Chipper & Sons Lumber Company, a franchise consisting of 2 official games and a popular, in relation to the original, fan-made sequel. Made by Scott Cawthon, this game, and a few other factors, would help inspire him to create the massively successful Five Nights at Freddy's franchise. Most of that is rather well known, and it's easy to look up, but the discussion doesn't go much further than that. Nobody talks much about the game past the fact that it looks creepy and it inspired FNAF, which I find rather disappointing. And as somebody who's played the original game from start to finish multiple times, I feel like most people don't entirely understand the game, at least to some extent. So how about you join me as we take a look at an underrepresented game, its lesser known official sequel, and its fan-made sequel that reflects the legacy of Chipper & Sons Lumber Company. So what actually happens in Chipper & Sons? Well, we play as the titular son, Tyke, and in the opening scene, we see our father, Chipper, tell us that the time has come for him to kick our gamer ass out of the house. At our age, Chipper was already committing war crimes and getting PTSD, and after warning us that the termites might have some weapons of mass destruction, Chipper gives us some plans, a walkie-talkie, and some land to use, so that we may finally touch some grass. And with that, we actually start the game. Chipper & Sons Lumber Co. is rather simple. It was originally made for mobile, which is pretty immediately obvious, and excluding minigames, everything is controlled with your mouse, and just about every icon is big and easily readable. Your goal is to chop down trees, process them into planks, and gather other materials, and craft various items to gain more stuff, get new upgrades, and progress the story. As you go through the game, you can upgrade your equipment, expand your land, and gain more blueprints. Although most of the materials will eventually be mass-produced in the late game, the local denizens are always helpful to talk to, as they're a great way to obtain resources early on, not to mention that they have the chance to give minigames. Almost all of the minigames give you a special ability you can use just once before needing to replay the game, and all of them make you feel like a game journalist with the amount of time you'll be failing basic challenges. Seriously, they can vary from less than a minute to almost 10, depending on how many neurons you have activated. Almost all of the minigames will also later be auto-completed for you with upgrades, which gives me mixed feelings. On one hand, it's tedious gameplay, but by the time you get the upgrade that finishes the minigames for you, the Stockholm Syndrome has already set in, and you'll be missing the extra bit of variety. So who are the people that ruin our minds in this game? Well, we have the people under the bridge, including a horrific looking mushroom that watches you in your sleep, a cheerful seafaring seagull that trades scraps from the ocean for carved wooden seagulls, and takes you out on adventures from time to time, some laid back whales chatting in what looks like the sewers, some tiki birds that have randomized trade requests and will give you brain damage if you don't have the supplies, some frogs who are fishing and mourning the early loss of their friend Earl, an owl who wakes up when his alarm goes off and has 2 different shops, and lastly the termite, who is another quest giver and merchant. In terms of the minigame rewards, both the termite and the whales give you different kinds of acorns to spawn different colored trees, the fungus and the seagull give you powers that help make growing trees easier, and the owl gives you a clock that skips time? I think it's kinda hard to tell without animations. The frogs also have a quest. Nobody understands the frog's quest. Except that's actually not true. Despite the Chipper & Sons wiki being super bare bones and incomplete, the entry for the frog's quest is in-depth, detailed, and actually explains how to complete the game. It's only possible with an expensive upgrade, however, and you're only rewarded with a trophy instead of a single-use power-up. It's basically an Easter egg, as the game shows up very, very rarely. Actually, there's a bunch of hidden Easter eggs in this game. I haven't captured everything possible, but some highlights include a mysterious robot, a submarine, and Earl's suicide. Oh, yeah, I guess you could already tell by now, but this game is actually kinda dark. The Funny Fungal watches people sleep, Chipper recounts multiple crimes, including war crimes, crimes against humanity, and crimes against the law. As mentioned earlier, we also hear people recount Earl's death, and we also have a disturbing story that ends up being foreshadowing to the final boss of the game. Oh yeah, this game also has a final boss, though if you want to know how they work, you'll have to play it yourself. I've already spoiled way too much. I will say though, that it's actually rather scary, especially with the lack of animations, or explanations for how it works. Whatever the boss is, it is not grandiose. After the boss, the main story ends, meaning that you'll stop going on nightly dates, getting new blueprints, and getting unique dialogue. However, if you keep playing after the ending, you'll get more land to build with, possibly forever. And lastly, before I continue on to the other games, I want to mention some good and bad parts of this game, which I'll bring up again later when talking about the future games in the series.
You so fucking precious when you smile.
As mentioned earlier, I think that Chipper can give you infinite land, which actually increases the replay value significantly. By having the space to build everything as many times as you want, it gives you the motivation to complete everything this game has to offer. The details and landscape of this world is also absolutely beautiful, and the music is likewise great. Scott has always been known for producing amazing atmospheres, and this game is no different. The dark tone is actually so gruesome that I actually doubt that the intended audience would actually understand what's going on, which in my opinion actually allows the game to be more compelling for kids and adults alike, for completely different reasons. And lastly, you'll sometimes get a random encounter with a space god made of wood. Yes, really. And each time you meet him, time significantly jumps forward, which is both really funny, as no one bats an eye to you disappearing and reappearing for a long time, and it's also really helpful, as your resources will build up during the time jump, meaning that you'll come back to lots of materials, helping you progress and reducing the grind. So with that in mind, what are some of the issues in this game? The big one for me is the item limit. Every material caps out at 99, and if you collect more, it just disappears into the ether, which really sucks because it's difficult to get exactly 99 of something, which blueprints will often require, and any excess is deleted and can't be saved for later. By pure coincidence, I found a way to basically break the game and get an absurd amount of materials from gifts, but for the most part, it's a waste of time, as the majority of the gifts you'll grab will just be wasted. Another problem is that moving between screens deletes anything you can pick up, or make random interactions disappear from that previous screen. So if you walk out of an area just as something drops, too bad, it's gone forever. There are a variety of things that can just spontaneously drop, such as gifts from purchasable companions to random falling stars that reward currency, and losing out on those rewards is rather frustrating. But with that all being said, go and play Chipper and Sons. Go on, it's free. You can hear me talk about the other games after you're done. So what's next? Well, I'm sure most of you think that I'm going to talk about Tyke and Sons next. And even though I'd like to look like a FNAF YouTuber and join all the big beefy FNAF boys, there's actually one more official Scott game to talk about.
Referencing FNAF's sister location, The Misadventures of Siegfried the Dark Elf on a Tuesday Night is a side-scrolling action platformer starring the titular Siegfried the Dark Elf. He must defeat the evil Bugfree by exploring his...
Nah, I'm just kidding. We have to talk about VIP Woodland Casino. So, it turns out during the era when Scott made quick games to pay the bills, he apparently made a whole lot of different slot games. And I mean a whole lot. As a freedom-fighting mad scientist who actually lives in Vegas, I absolutely dislike these kinds of games. Slots are for everyone who doesn't live here. If you aren't from Vegas, please come here and go to our casinos. And when you've spent all the money you can stomach losing, please leave. All we want is your cold hard cash, and when we wring you dry, we want you to go away. Is that understood? Is that understood? What was I saying? Something about the Lion's kill count? No, sorry. Woodland Casino! Yeah! Woodland Casino. It's got Chipper and crew. It's got a lever. Hit the lever! Well, here's the actual plot. After killing a Lovecraftian eldritch horror and saving the world probably, Chipper decides to tempt fate once more and starts gambling. Eventually, he puts the cabin on the line and loses it. So now you're tasked with cleaning up his mess, and the only way to do that is by playing the lowest house edge casino game, the slots. And congratulations, you now know about this game. And this is where the official story of Chipper ends. Kind of, I'll get to that later. Now, we go past the official games. As many of you know, there's a fan-made sequel. Inspired by Scott's work both before and after FNAF, Tyke & Sons is a game set in the Lumberco universe with elements from both the Chipper and Freddy franchise. Made by Mixilus, the game is one of the most popular FNAF fan projects on GameJolt, and with good reason. Its gameplay is compelling for the whole runtime, and its visuals, at a quick glance, look similar to Scott's visual style. Though anyone that tells you that it's just like Scott's work is completely wrong. Before I discuss visuals, however, let's talk about the game. Tyke & Sons has similar gameplay mechanics to Chipper & Sons. In this game, you control Tyke's son, Mike, and you must chop down trees to gather wood, process them into planks and other materials, and craft various items. This game has far more coverage than Chipper's, so I won't go into as much detail overall, but I'd like to compare the gameplay of Tyke to Chipper and see some of the strengths and weaknesses between this new game and its predecessor.
At last, I am surrounded by people who get me. People who understand me and people who think like me.
The item limit's gone. That, or the limit is so high as to not be a problem. This makes building much easier, and is probably my single favorite change. The story is also given a greater focus. Rather than just reading a text box, you get cutscenes, more traditional bosses, and more unique dialogue. There are also a lot more animations, making it easier to tell what's going on. Though this also has the drawback of making transitions much slower as well. This is also not necessarily an improvement, but I appreciate the idea of selling extra wood for coins. I think it would have been extremely helpful in the original game. Interactions with structures aren't random anymore, meaning that you don't have to roll the dice to get important supplies now, which means that instead of getting gift boxes more, you'll get most of the stuff through the mail, which makes grinding much easier.
My God, what are you doing? Ah! Ah! Oh dear!
The watering can now needs to be spammed with the W key, meaning that you're more often distracted with the button mashing rather than what's actually important on the screen. The minigames no longer give temporary bonuses, instead of just unique material. This is actually part of a greater issue, which is that the game is just now more simplified. With less space to work with, trees to plant, and upgrades to obtain, and you don't get coins from building, but instead by just clicking all around the screen for coins to drop. And those coins are only spent on items, with no equivalent of the owl shop being given. And some of the minigames are now required, which stings a little as the difficulty of the game is far more varied, from easy to insanely hard, which just makes the overall game experience less fun. And lastly, the art style is way less interesting than in the original. And I just want to make it clear right now that despite everything I've complained about so far, this game is very, very good. Almost definitely better than the original Chipper & Sons. And I recommend that everybody play it if you haven't already. And I also want to make clear that I love the designs that the creator of this game, Mixilus, produced. But I don't agree with all the comments I see saying that this game looks identical to Chipper & Sons. Because it just doesn't. Take this for example. Look at the cabin from Chipper and the cabin from Tyke. See how much more detailed the original looks? The logs look more colorful and organic, while the ones in Tyke look more monotone and fake. Places like the swamp and the robot graveyard don't even appear in the sequel, which stinks because they were some of the most visually interesting places in Chipper & Sons. Now with all that being said, I'm actually only talking about what is at best only half of Tyke & Sons gameplay, and the other half is far and away the best part of an overall fantastic game, though it takes direct influence from the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise, rather than the Chipper & Sons series, so I won't be talking about it. I'm also terrible at FNAF, so I don't feel qualified to review. The only one I'm good at, and would be willing to talk about in the future, is FNAF World, which I think is also underappreciated, though that might be starting to turn around with the increased attention the game's been receiving from creators such as Astral Spiff. Going back to Tyke & Sons, there's one area that is visually improved upon compared to Chipper & Sons, which is the robot designs. The robots in the original game look great in my opinion, and they're adapted pretty faithfully, if not a little shinier, but the brand new bots look great and reference different styles of animatronics seen in the Five Nights games, and by extension, Scott's greater collection of work. Chip-O-Mats 1 and 2 resemble the original and toy characters from the first two FNAF games, and I'd argue that the Chip-O-Mat 3 takes notes from the withered designs from FNAF 2. Spring Crab is a not-so-subtle reference to Spring Trap from FNAF 3, which is clearly inspired by, gooey living wires and all. Same goes for Phantom Chip-O-Mats, resembling and bearing the name of the Phantoms also seen in FNAF 3. Happy Shroom and Kill Timber look very similar to the Nightmare animatronics seen in FNAF 4, with sharp claws, little companion, and way too much teeth. The Rockstar characters in this game also include Fredbear, so I doubt that I need to explain its similarity to the Rockstars seen in FNAF 6. And lastly is cbill.exe. Now it's obvious to tell that C-Billy is designed after the sister location animatronics, which, if you want to delve deeper, is reminiscent of Scott's previous game, The Desolate Hope, which... Wait, what? What is this? This is the first level of The Desolate Hope, and it looks just like the Lumber Company. And the first boss of the game looks like... Oh no. It's all connected. I was supposed to mention how Chipper and Coffee from The Desolate Hope both appear in FNAF World as well, as playable characters in the Halloween backrooms. But unlike Coffee, this is actually not Chipper's first appearance, as he's actually an optional final boss in the game. But he died in that game. Doesn't that mean his plan failed? Wait, no. The Halloween backroom comes later chronologically. But this is the last we see of Chipper. It's not like he's in Pizzeria Simulator Sister Locate. Oh. Is that? Oh no. From the very beginning, Chipper has been there, even in FNAF 1, as an early character was intended to be a beaver. Everything ties back to Chipper, and we're all too blind to see it. As of this year, Chipper & Sons has turned 10 years old, with many thinking that its only legacy is inspiring a man from Salados, Texas, to turn this creepy character and robots into creepy robot characters. But in the end, the beaver's influence is one not meant to be understood by man. I've been cursed to see how Chipper holds together the fabric of our reality. But I must warn you not to follow my path, as there's no telling how deep this hole goes. Every time I thought I reached rock bottom, I could hear the sounds of trees being cut below me.
This isn't fair. It was never fair. It was supposed to be me. It was always supposed to be me. My world was lush and beautiful, full of strange and colorful creatures. But no, that wasn't enough for you. You wanted to be scared. You wanted to feel dread. What happened to me? What happened to us? Scary. You haven't seen the last of me. Freddy Fazbear won't be the one who'll be sharpening his teeth on your bones. It will be me. It will be me.
And the final question, which everybody's wanted to ask, is will Chipper ever return like he said he would?
Hey, Chipper is, listen, all of these games are haunted by different spirits, right?
Right.
But the real spirit haunting this whole franchise is Chipper. Chipper is haunting this whole franchise. I mean, I received a box of merchandise the other day, like manufacturer samples, and there's a plush toy of Chipper, well, L Chip,
Yeah.
But I held that plush toy and I was looking at L Chip, and I was thinking to myself, you got merch. You got merch, Chipper.
Yeah.
You were an abysmal failure, but you found your way into this merch, and there you sit with that goofy grin on your face. Yeah, no. So Chipper's already back. He's infiltrated the franchise.
Yeah.